Either way, they sold like hotcakes thanks perhaps to these simple yet succulent ingredients which made them cheap yet fruity. In 1983, 10% of all escorts that left the showroom were XR3s, while more than a quarter of all Golfs were GTIs. This was a time when greed was good, greed worked, and there was big money to be made from hot hatches. So even the dullest cars had some chilies shoved up their exhaust pipes. However, despite a number of attempts to improve the breed and despite Essex man's fondness for the Escort, Volkswagen's Golf was still the favoured son.
Thought I knew what a good car was all about, but it wasn't until I drove one of these that I realised just how good they really are.
I would summarise the GTI by saying that it was the best car that I've ever driven.
I think that it is actually the best crackerjack hot hatch in the world.
It's easy to see why. It was the original. GTI became the generic name for hot hatches in the same way that Hoover became a generic name for vacuum cleaners. This is what we're going to buy, and we're not going to change our minds unless something comes along which is demonstrably better. Welcome everyone to the 205 GTI. It didn't matter which engine you had, the 1.6 or the 1.9, this little Peugeot was fan-bleeding-tastic. And then there was the design. Ital had done the Golf, and Ital is one of the great Italian styling houses. But Pininfarina is better, and Pininfarina had done the Peugeot. In its environment, i.e. right now, this is one of the very, very fastest cars that money can buy. You could bring a Ferrari down here, or a Porsche 911, or a Lamborghini Diablo, and not one of them would be able to keep up with this. I promise you. There's always the sense that you don't really need to slow down for corners. You can, in fact, put your foot down and go around them even faster, and it just hangs on. They tell me that this part of Norfolk is absolutely beautiful, but I'm sorry, I really don't have time to look. Put very simply, the 205 GTI was smaller, lighter, more responsive and faster than the Golf GTI. And then Peugeot decided to ladle even more kudos into the mix by making a rally version. This may have looked like a 205, but the only thing the two had in common was the windscreen frame. The rally version was mid-engine, turbocharged, four-wheel drive. It was 5 times more powerful than the normal road cars. It was basically a Formula One racer with mudguards. The speeds it could achieve were phenomenal, and so too were the size of the crowds that turned out to see it. Pretty soon, Lancia challenged the Peugeot with its Delta S4, and then Audi fought back with a short wheelbase version of its Quattro. Even Rover turned up to the party with a fat Metro. Rallying was no longer seen as a sport for people with Bovril and bobble hats. It was a high-tech hot hatch battlefield, and Ford decided they too wanted a slice of the action. So they began work on a car that would turn the sport quite literally upside down. The car they came up with, the RS200, was not designed to look like a mainstream model. It was purpose-built and purposeful, a modern-day off-road GT40. Now, the rules of rallying at the time were very boring, but quite simple, so pay attention. In order to compete in the top class, which was called Group B, don't ask why, you had to make 200 examples of the car you wanted to race. This was to stop the richer companies developing a hugely expensive, hugely fast one-off. But 200, that was nothing. You keep 20 or 30 for yourself and then flog the rest off at whatever price you fancied. When it emerged into the woods, Ford really did think that their £10 million investment would be paid off several times over. But it was not to be. On only its second outing in Portugal, it ploughed into a wall of spectators. "30 were injured, 3 were killed, and within weeks the Group B cars were banned. Ford now had a big problem. A warehouse full of RS200s that had no rallying pedigree whatsoever. So they converted them into road cars and set off down the A12 with a bag full of brochures and some winning smiles. Hi. Bye. Please. Sadly, they arrived in EC1 to find that the stock market had just crashed, and that all of a sudden no one was particularly interested in a Ford, which cost £50,000. They were eventually forced to sell the RS200 for chicken feed, and now no one can even remember it ever existed. In fact, if you ask anyone to name a fast Ford from this period of history, only one name will crop up.